So there's a dispute amongst Muslims on the question of succession of the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam with regards to the position of leadership after the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. In other words, who succeeds the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam as his heir, as the leader of Muslims in all affairs of deen and dunya, in all affairs of religion as well as secular life. Who would be the leader? There's a huge dispute that has run amongst Muslims since the time of the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam till this day. So on the one hand, we have the Omari school who have a very peculiar and strange belief and view with regard to the question of imama and leadership. On the other hand, there is the Shia denomination, the followers of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salatu wassalam. The Omari denomination maintains that the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam did not leave any instructions. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not given any instructions with regard to the question of imama, neither in Quran nor in Sunnah. In this matter, as far as Quran and Sunnah is concerned, there's a total void, a total lack of instructions. So we do not know what are the instructions of the Lord, what are the instructions of the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, who should lead the Muslims community immediately after the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and then afterwards, generation after generation after generation, till our day at this time and in the posterity in the future. So this position is untenable. This position is insensible. This position is irrational, is obviously wrong for many reasons. Even if we look at Islam from a secular perspective and we look how the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam viewed the posterity, the times to come after him, it was obvious to any person that the question of imama, the question of leadership, had to be settled somehow by the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. He would give instructions and directives whether the ummah can select and elect and choose their leaders, or the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam would appoint someone to lead the Muslims after him, or there would be another formula, another set of processes through which the imama of a certain individual would be realized and materialized in the Islamic society. I mentioned to you that the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam time and again said that after me there are very hard times to come. There are dark times like blankets of night, blankets of dark nights that are coming one after the other after me. The Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said the majority of my ummah will go astray. My ummah will divide and split into 73 sects, and all of them would go to hell except one denomination, one sect, one party. The Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, as far as ashab and as far as his companions are concerned, time and again, repeatedly, and as I mentioned before, all these ahadith, all these proofs, I quote to you, I present to you from the Omari sources with regard to his companions. The Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam time and again mentioned that a good number of them will end up in fire of hell and the inferno of the Lord's wrath for the reason of their innovations that they will introduce, that they will bring into his religion, that they will adulterate the pristine teachings of the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam after him. And the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam mentioned in many of his sermons that after him there will be imams who will be shaitan, who will be Satan, who will be devil. There will be personification of the devil in the human form. If their appearance would be the human, and their souls and their hearts would be the hearts of Satan, of shayateen, في جثمان إنس. And I presented to you these ahadith. And we all know that it's the leaders who have split the Muslim community. It's the leaders who have introduced innovations into religion. A person who does not have following, a person who does not enjoy a prestigious position in the society, a person who is not regarded as a spiritual leader, a religious leader, he cannot introduce any sort of innovation into religion because no one will follow him. So the Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, despite knowing all of this, and despite claiming that religion is complete, not complete, perfect, اليوم أكملت لكم دينكم, he remained silent. Furthermore, not only him, his Lord, the creator of the heavens and the earth, he remained silent, and Allah left the Muslims in a dark. Allah left the Muslims in ignorance. And the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa wasallam left the Muslims in ignorance, and he died while he knew he will die, and his Lord knew that he would die. There's a passage in Bukhari and as well as Muslim. There's a conversation between Abdullah ibn Omar and Omar ibn al-Khattab. When Omar was stabbed by Sayyiduna Abu Lu'lu'ah radiyallahu ta'ala an wa rahmatullahi alayh, Abdullah ibn Omar comes to his sister Hafsa, and Hafsa says to him, your father is not going to appoint anyone as his successor. Abdullah ibn Umar cannot believe this. He says that this cannot be. His sister says, no, that's the case. He is not appointing any specific person as his heir, as the successor. So Abdullah ibn Umar says, I'll talk to my father. He comes to his father, and his father is wounded, mortally wounded, fatally wounded, and he will soon die from these wounds. And he speaks to his father and he says, I've heard people talking that you intend not to appoint anyone as your successor. Omar says, that is the case. I do not intend to appoint any specific person as my successor. Abdullah ibn Umar says, now pay attention to this passage of Abdullah ibn Umar. It's a reasoning, it's an argument, it's a logical explanation of a dire situation to which Omar agrees and to which you will agree, and every sensible person will agree. Abdullah ibn Umar says, look, father, if you had a shepherd who is taking care of your cattle and your sheep and your goats and your camels in the desert, and it was his responsibility that you gave this person this responsibility that he has to look after these animals for you. If he comes to see you for a day or two and leaves these cattle, these animals, the sheep and the goats and the cows and the camels in the desert without appointing his replacement, someone to take care of these animals in his absence, you would say, and everyone would say, and it would be abundantly clear that this person has exposed these animals to being destroyed, to being annihilated, to being attacked by wolves, to go astray. This whole herd will not stay in its place, and you will say that he has betrayed you. Umar heard this argument. So Abdullah ibn Umar was making a case that if you say that you're not appointing anyone for after yourself, imagine if a shepherd did the same thing to animals. You would not hesitate for a second to judge that this shepherd has betrayed me, that he has not fulfilled his responsibility. His responsibility was to make sure the cattle are taken care of, and now he has not done so. He has left them in the desert. And then Abdullah ibn Umar adds, and the case of people is of course more serious and more critical and more important than shepherd. And Umar hears his son and he says, yes, that is the case. And he agrees. So, and then Umar Omar was, because Omar's, I'm telling you what did Omar do, just as a digression, and that's not the topic that I have to go now, and I don't have the time to delve into in depth. But Omar's intention was to appoint Uthman after him as the leader. And he wanted to make sure that Ali alayhi salatu wasalam does not become the caliph after him. However, he did not want to appoint Uthman directly. He did not want to be responsible for Uthman's appointment himself. The reason being, because Omar in many narrations, he says that if Uthman, because he knew Uthman very well, if Uthman becomes the caliph after me, he is going to appoint his family members to embezzle and to take advantage of the treasury of the Muslims, and people will rise up against him and they will kill him. So Omar had a very astute and a very acute perception and observation with regard to the fate of Uthman. He said that. So he did not want to be responsible for appointing Uthman, and later on to be criticized that he appointed, because Uthman, the majority of Muslims, majority of Sahaba, including Aisha, they rose up with the sword against Uthman, and Uthman was not killed by any non-Muslim forces. Uthman was not killed by any invaders from the outside. Uthman was killed in Medina by Sahaba, by the encouragement of Sahaba, and by the directives of Aisha herself. And that's another story. So Omar did not want to be responsible for that. Rather, he arranged for a council, and he arranged the voting as such. There would be 6 members. He arranged the votes as such that Abdurrahman ibn Auf would have the veto power, and that will ensure that only Uthman would become caliph, and he would become caliph and appointed caliph through that council after Omar. But at any rate, so Omar himself and Abdullah ibn Umar, they agreed that this is a great betrayal. If a shepherd has a few animals to take care of, he has a herd, and he leaves that herd in the mountain or in the desert and comes home for a few days without appointing a successor, that would be a betrayal to the animals and betrayal to the owner of the herd. And the case of the Muslim society is greater than that. Rather, the point I'm trying to make to you is that this very irrational suggestion that someone, if he has a herd in the desert, he can leave the herd and just go, disappear, without appointing anyone, without making anybody responsible for taking care of the herd. That Omar and his son, Abdullah ibn Umar, are saying if such an action is attributed to a shepherd, that shepherd would be held in contempt, and he would be held in treason, he would be held in betrayal. The Omari denomination, they ascribe the same thing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. That they left, that Allah took his Nabi, transferred his Nabi from this dunya to the eternal abode without giving any instructions on the question of imam. So, how is an imam made an imam? How is the imamah of an imam materialized? And how is this imamah is established? How does a person become an imam? How does a person become the leader of the Muslim society? Who succeeds the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam to be the leader of the Muslims and their religious issues, as well as in their secular and political and other social and economical and military aspects of their lives? What are the instructions in the Omari sect? So, this book is called Al-Imama Al-Udhma in the Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah, Ta'alif Abdullah ibn Umar ibn Sulaiman al-Dumayji. This person, Abdullah ibn Umar ibn Sulaiman al-Dumayji, is a very senior scholar in Saudi Arabia, in the Arabian Peninsula. And he is in the board of several institutes of higher education, many universities. and he has held the chair of dean in many Islamic universities in Saudi Arabia, and he is a Wahhabi, a Salafi, and he has written this book on political Islam. And the title of the book means Al-Imamatul Uzma inda Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah. Imama, the grand imama. What does he mean by grand imama? By grand imama, he means the succession of the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. By grand imama, he means the position of leadership of the entire ummah. The entire ummah. Because imama could be for a mosque, imama could be for a limited. The term imama leadership, it could be of limited usage, limited application. So he, by al-imama al-uzma, the grand imama, he means the position of success the Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam had as the leader of the Muslim society, who succeeds him, who carries out those duties of leadership. Okay, in this book, page 125, Al-Fasl, طرق انعقاد الإمامة. Fourth chapter, the pathways through which imama is established. Imama of a person is established, his imama convenes, and he becomes an imam. What are the ways? Now, these ways, this is very important to understand. And this is, if you understand the theory of imama between Shia and Omariya, then it becomes very clear. On the one hand, we have the Omari position of imama, which is evidently irrational. That cannot be uttered. It's totally a hodgepodge of contradictions. And on the other hand, is the question of Imam of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salatu wassalam. We maintain that after the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, per Allah's hukum, someone like the Nabi, like the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, can succeed him. Only someone who is like him in everything, in all aspects of his personality. Only he can succeed him. If he doesn't have the same qualification as the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he cannot be successor. And only Allah knows who has those qualifications. Who has he granted those qualifications? Same ilm, same isma, same courage, same akhlaq, same valor, same integrity of the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Who has that to whom Allah has granted those qualities? Only Allah knows, and therefore only Allah can appoint. And Allah indeed has appointed in Quran and in Sunnah. So in Shia belief system, there is no void of instructions. So it rhymes. And it's consistent with Quran and with Sunnah. Al-yawma akmaltu lakum dinakum. And the perspective of the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam with respect to the question of leadership of his ummah from the time of his death until the day of judgment. While on the other hand, the Omari position is a position doesn't take a rocket scientist, doesn't take a lot of thinking and cogitation to determine that it cannot be true. So he says, and another, this very grand professor of several colleges, Islamic colleges, Shari'i universities in Saudi Arabia, says, and another ila nusus al-kitabi wa sunnah. When we look on the nusus, on the statements, on the writings of kitab and sunnah, statements in kitab and sunnah, فإننا لا نجد هناك نصا صريحا في طريق التعيين التي تثبت بها الإمامة للإمام. We do not find any instructions. There's no instructions. Absolutely nothing. Neither per their perception, because all the directives of the Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam on the question of imamat of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam, they ignore that. Even if it's Quran, they ignore it. Even if it's in Sunnah, through repetitive chains of narration, they disregard that. So what is left? If you take the directives of Allah and the instructions of the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam, the commands of Quran and Sunnah with respect to the Imam of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam, and push that aside, what is left then? On the question of Imam, there remains void. There remains a total lack, a black hole as far as Imam is concerned. So that's why he says that when we look on the nusus of Kitab and Sunnah, when we examine the statements of Kitab and Sunnah, فإننا لا نجد هناك نصا صريحا. We do not find any clear statement. We do not find any clear instructions في تعيين الطريقة التي تثبت بها الإمامة للإمام. Any clear instructions that would determine the pathway, the formula through which the imama of an imam is established, through which an imam becomes an imam, through which a person's imama is determined to be shari. There's nothing. Who is imam? Nothing in the Sharia. Nothing. And what he is saying is honestly, and according to his worldview, true. He's not lying. Because what he does and what scholars like him do is there are myriads and uncountable instructions from Allah and Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, which clearly establish the Imam of Amirul Mu'mineen alayhi salam and establish the Imam of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. So they push that aside. They push all that. If it's a verse of Quran, doesn't matter, push it aside. If it's a statement of the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam that cannot be interpreted, it's so clear that cannot even be interpreted, like Hadith al-Thaqalain, that cannot be interpreted in any other manner, any other fashion, but imama in wujub al-ta'a, and the obligation and necessity of following Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. They disregard it, they ignore it, they push it aside, they hide it, sweep it under the rugs. So when you do that, after that, of course, then you don't have anything left. You don't have any ways how an imam is made an imam. وليس ثمة إلا النصوص العامة المتعلقة بالولاية والتولية. So with regard to how an imam becomes an imam, which person becomes an imam, there is no nas. There is no instruction. There are some general nusus al-amma. There are some general statements about imama, that imams will be from Quraysh, imams will be 12 individuals, you have to obey your imams, and then there are instructions that cannot be from the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, that they attribute time and again to the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. The Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said that even if your imam is shaitan, even if your imam is shaitan and he is abusing you, you still must follow him. What a faith, how convenient for all dictators and despots of the world, right? سواء كانت الصغرى أم كبرى كالشورى ونحوها. So there are general statements about the question of imama, such as the question of, or some general counsels, general directives that are not specifically for imama. Some are specifically for imama, general statements, like what? Imama would be from Quraysh. There will be 12 individuals after me. Such these general ones, but they do not determine who they are, how they become an imam, nothing there. Or something, general statements that are not specifically for imama, that such as shura, counsel, it's better to take advice and take counsel from one another. So here we clearly see, and this is not just his position. If perhaps some people would say, okay, this scholar is mistaken. So my challenge, my request from those viewers who would disagree with me is that please go ahead. You find those statements. If you have any hadith or verse of the Noble Quran with regard to imama, how the imama of an imam is realized, how is imama becomes shara'i, how do we determine this person as a shara'i imam, show us that verse of the Noble Quran, show us that hadith of Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, which the Omaris agree, which the Omari denomination, they have narrated and they interpreted on these terms. Okay, that having said, my dear brothers and sisters, so then so if there is nothing from Allah, nothing from Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Nothing from Allah on the question of imam, and nothing from Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So how the Omari, what is their position that a person becomes an imam? So they have principles in that regard, but they agree and they admit that these principles are not from Allah. These principles are not from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. These are not hadith. These are not verse of the Noble Quran, but they have principles. Those principles are what? These principles are the actions of later khulafa. Later khulafa, how did they become khalifa? They become khalifa through bay'ah. They become khalifa through succession. They become khalifa through the sword. 3 ways. Throughout Muslim history, how did a caliph become a caliph? How did a leader become a leader? Through these 3 ways. Some people did not. There are no elections, obviously. There's always this misinformation and disinformation by our brethren in Islam and their scholars. They want to present their faith as democratic. that we believe in the question of the Ummah chooses. The Ummah has never chosen their leader. Except one time, after the murder of Uthman ibn Affan, they selected Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. That was through popular will, and the majority of people came to Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. But other than that, they believe in bay'ah. Bay'ah by members of Ahlul Halli wal Aqd. Ahlul Halli wal Aqd. Caliphs have become caliphs in 3 ways. Either bay'ah. So bay'ah means pledge of allegiance. By whom? By people, Ahlul Halli wal Aqd. People of Hal means to open, to solve. Aqd means to put a knot. Aqd means to shut, to close. Ahlul Halli wal Aqd. Leaders of the community. In other words, senior members of the community. So who are the senior members of the community? Who are the leaders of the community? They could be generals of the armies. They are famous merchants, well-to-do individuals as far as finance is concerned. Chiefs of the various tribes, and they could be people of knowledge, scholars. So these are Ahlul Halli wal Aqd. So popular will of the majority of Muslims is never the criteria. And there's no requirement for the caliph to gain his legitimacy from the support of majority of Muslims. That's not the case. And of course, because in society, not everyone is a leader. Not everyone is influential. Not everyone is a community leader. So who would be the community leaders? People who command armed forces. They have their own militia, or if there's an army, they have a position of leadership in the army. Or if they're very rich, if a person is extremely wealthy, he's a big merchant, obviously because of his wealth. Today is the case, and likewise was the case in the ancient times, that such people could effect great amount of impact politically in the society. And also knowledgeable people, and also people who come from influential families, and they hail from dynasties that are dynasties of chiefs, dynasties of leaders. So such people. And it's not a requirement that the majority of such people, even among Ahlul Halli wal Aqd, community leaders, it's not necessary the majority of them would pledge allegiance to a person. Even 1, 2, 3, 4, if they pledge allegiance to someone, he becomes Shar'i Khalifa. He becomes the Shar'i ruler. So, these are the ways through which Khalifas have become Khalifa, and very conveniently, Omari scholars have adopted their actions, their seerah, their methodology of becoming Khalifa as the Shar'i way. The first way through which Muslims throughout the history, a person has become Khalifa is through bay'ah. And bay'ah does not mean popular will. Bay'ah does not mean voting, as we have today in the world, voting, and whoever gets the majority of votes, he becomes leader. No, bay'ah means by Ahlul Halli wal Aqd, community leaders, influential people in society. And when we are talking about the influential people in the society, we are not talking about the majority of them, because Muslim lands are so vast. Even at the time of, by the time of Uthman, Muslim lands were very vast. It was impossible to bring together the majority of these people together. Because there were people who were influential in Syria, people influential in Khurasan, people influential in Iraq, people influential in Yemen, in Bahrain, in Egypt, North Africa. So it is impossible to bring all community leaders. So when we are talking about bay'ah by a few of them, even 3, 4, even one person, if he does bay'ah with another person, he becomes Shari'i Khalifa. And this is strange. Because by Sharia, we mean what? By Sharia, we mean that knowledge, that light, that guidance that is divine. That is divine. If you adulterate that pristine teaching, and what politicians do and how these corrupt caliphs have become caliphs, you attribute that to be Sharia, then of course, you have so many sources of Sharia. The primary source, the only source of Sharia, then therefore is not Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So that is the first method through which Khulafa have become Khulafa, Caliphs have become Caliphs. The second path through which Khalifa becomes Khalifa is through succession, appointment of the previous Khalifa. Appointment of the previous Khalifa, such as Muawiyah appoints his son Yazid as Khalifa after him. Or Marwan appoints his son after him, after he dies, that his son would be Khalifa after him. Or Abu Bakr appoints Omar. And that is very strange. They do not consider the same privilege for the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. The Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, they do not consider him, they do not attribute the same thing to the Nabi. While he has clearly done this, he is appointed for after him, for posterity, Khulafa, until the day of judgment. His Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam. However, because Abu Bakr has appointed Omar, and then later on other Khulafa have appointed sometimes their sons, sometimes their nephews, therefore this becomes what? This becomes Shara'i Khilafah. All right. So that's path number 2, process number 2, through which a Khalifa becomes Khalifa. And the important thing to note is that this is Shara'i way. So this person, when he becomes Khalifa, he indeed, in the religion of God, and the religion of the deity, and the religion of Islam, per Quran and Sunnah, he is Khalifa. And it's obligatory upon Muslims to obey him, to support him, and is prohibited for Muslims to rise up against him and disobey him. Number 3, pathway through which throughout history and Muslim world people have become caliphs is through the sword. So if someone comes with a small militia and dispatches the king, or if there's a palace coup, a son kills his father, or a nephew kills his uncle, or somebody comes and invades and he kills the existing caliphs and he dispatches and he beheads all their families and saws off their heads, right? And rapes their woman. And he appoints himself as Khalifa, even if he's corrupt, he becomes Khalifa. And it's obligatory. So there's 2 things here. It's the Omari do not say this prudent, just as we say, it's taqiyya, on the account of taqiyya. If somebody is a dictator, he comes with the sword. Okay, if you cannot resist them, then okay, you try to get along and you try to go along. They do not say that. They say Shar'an. He becomes Khalifa and it's Shar'an haram. If you disobey him, Allah will hold you to account for your disobedience for this person who became Khalifa by the sword. Okay. So these are the 3 ways. Allah doesn't appoint. Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam does not appoint anyone as Khalifa, nor have they established a formula through which a person becomes Khalifa. All these 3 ways that I mentioned that a person becomes Khalifa is not by Quran, it's not by Sunnah, it's not through dictation of Quran or Sunnah. It's because the amal, the action of caliphs has been such, therefore it's Shara'i. So that tells you a lot, that the Omari theology, the Omari fiqh, the Omari belief system was formulated per the expediencies and interests, political interests of the rulers of the time. Okay, this book is called غاية المرام في علم الكلام لسيف الآمدي. He was born at the year 551. He is an Ash'ari. As you know, Ash'ari are the majority of Muslims, obviously. And Maturidiyya and Ash'ari have very minute disputes among themselves. And Maturidiyya are generally followers and emulators of Ash'ari on most issues. And the majority of arguments in Ilm al-Kalam, Ilm al-Aqa'id, that Maturidis have, they have borrowed it from Ash'ari. And this Saif al-Amidi is one of the foremost scholars of towering figure in Ilm al-Kalam. This book was published in Cairo, as you know. Al-Azhar is an Ash'ari institute. In Cairo in 1971, and here we go at page 276, وَأَمَّا مُعْتَقَدُ أَهْلِ الْحَقِّ مِنْ أَهْلِ السُنَّةِ وَأَصْحَابِ الْحَدِيثِ. He says the belief system of the Ahl al-Haq, the righteous people, the people whose beliefs are righteous. Who are they? Ahl al-Sunnah wa Ashab al-Hadith. Ahl al-Sunnah, by Ahl al-Sunnah he means Asha'ira in Maturidiyya. Wa Ashab al-Hadith, by Ashab al-Hadith he means the followers of Ahmad ibn Hanbal. So there's a big dispute amongst the Omari denomination who is Ahl al-Sunnah. The followers of Ahmad ibn Hanbal, whom you call Salafi, sometimes you call them Wahhabi, the Hanabila, they call themselves Ahl al-Hadith. And they call Asha'ira mushrik. Asha'ira are mushrik, they're Jahmiyyah, and you will see this often in the books of Ibn Taymiyyah, that who is Ahl Sunnah? Ahl Sunnah is him and Ahmad ibn Hanbal, and whoever has their belief system. They consider the Lord, they consider the creator of the heavens and the earth, an animal in the heavens, who goes up and down, and who has all the attributes of an animal, a beast, and he laughs and he walks and he goes up and down, he gets sick and he cries and he puts his foot on in hell, and he is very similar to people, to you and me, so much so that on the day of judgment people cannot recognize him. The Lord appears and no one recognizes him, and then he pulls up his pants and he exposes his calf. So there is something in his calf. His calf is different than others, so people recognize that this has to be the Lord. So this is very, very well known. Nastajiru billah. That the dispute amongst Asha'ira and Maturidiyya on one hand, and Salafiyya throughout history has been very hot, and always they have done takfir of each other. They have considered each other infidels, because Ahlul Hadith, Al-Hashwiyya, Al-Mujassima, they're called Al-Hashwiyya because Ash'ari call them Al-Hashwiyya, people who don't have any senses. Total jahil. They call them total jahil. And Mujassima, people who believe that the Lord is a physique, that he's a body, that he's a beast. They maintain that Asha'ira, they refuse the attributes of the Lord. They do. Why Asha'ira? Why you do not admit to the attributes of the Lord, such as having hands, feet, beard, face, and all that? And he sits on his throne, on his chair, and he's so fat, so bulky that the chair, the throne, squeaks. Why don't you agree to the to the attribute of a squeaking throne? So that's on the one hand. On the other hand, the Asha'ira and Maturidiyya say this is a beast that you believe in. Such a thing is a beast. Such a thing has to be makhlooq. Such a thing has to have a creator. Such a thing is in need of time and space. And he undergoes change. And we know anything that undergoes change, he's hadith. He has to have a beginning. And anything that has a beginning, he has a beginning. He cannot be eternal. And any such thing who's a beast, an animal, he can have children, he can have brothers, there could be similar things like him. Whereas the Lord, lam yakun lahu kufuwan, lam yalid wa lam yulad wa lam yakun lahu kufuwan ahad. So there's very hard disagreement has been throughout history. But now, since the Iranian Revolution, they've cooled down because, and this is one of the great detriments of the Iranian Revolution, of Khomeini's position, because after Khomeini's coming to the stage and he made the Shia madhab political, what happened is the historical takfir of these two denominations, between Azhar and Hanabila, between Asha'ira and Salafiyya, this was pushed to the side. And it seemed, a lot of people don't know this, right? It seems like all of their scholars are together and united in takfir of Shia, where this not has been the case. Ibn Taymiyyah has written so many books, hundreds of books. All of his books have been against. He wrote hundreds of books against Asha'ira. Hundreds of books against Asha'ira. And every book he does takfir of Asha'ira. Takfir. He wrote only one book against Shia. Right? He spent his lifetime, Ahmad ibn Taymiyyah al-Harrani, doing takfir of Asha'ira. But all that is forgotten now. All that is forgotten. At any rate, in this book, غاية المرام في علم الكلام لسيف الآمدي. So, on page number 276, he says, وَأَمَّا مُعْتَقَدُ أَهْلِ الْحَقِّ مِنْ أَهْلِ السُنَّةِ. أهل الحق, the people who have righteous belief on the question of imama. That encompasses all the Omari denominations. All the Omari denominations, and it excludes Shia. So who are they? Ahl Sunnah. By Ahl Sunnah he means Asha'ira wa Ashab al-Hadith. By that he means Hashwiyya Mujassima, the followers of Ahmad ibn Hanbal. فهو أن التعيين غير ثابت بالنص بل بالاختيار. He said that Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam did not appoint anyone. Yani they have an ijma', they have a consensus that the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam did not appoint anyone for after himself as the leader of the Muslim society. This is al-Hisam al-Maslul ala muntaqisi ashab al-Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, written by Muhammad ibn Umar ibn Mubarak al-Hadrami. He died at year 930 after the Hijrah of the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. At page 55 on the question of Imamah, he says, إن أقد الإجماع على أنه صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم لم ينص على لأمته على استخلاف أحد معين. The Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam did not appoint any specific person as his caliph. We have ijma' on the question. And there are many other books. And in Bukhari, Omar says the same thing. In Muslim, again, Omar says the same thing. And interpreters and exegetes, writers of Bukhari in Muslim, time and again, they have mentioned that this establishes ijma'. Omar's assertion that the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam has not appointed anyone as his heir establishes a consensus that there's Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam died and he remained silent. Who should replace him? Now, they have these three ways. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam did not appoint a specific person as a successor. That's one. Number two, so did he give a formula? Did he give any directives that through which, if you follow this path, these steps, you can choose your imam. You can make somebody an imam. Did he say that if somebody becomes imam through the sword, he becomes shar'i khalifa? Did he mention all these things? Did he mention if a khalifa appoints another person as his khalifa, his successor, he becomes shar'i khalifa? No, nothing. So all these things were made up, and they just agreed upon that these are the ways of a person becoming an imam. Okay, I've spoken for 50 minutes. I think that's sufficient for today on the question of imama and the Omari denomination. Okay, may Allah bless you all. Now I open my phone lines. Okay.